welcome to this episode. This episode is going to be with my first guest of the new year 2019. So I thought we'd kick it off with a little discussion about ghostly encounters, haunted locations, and paranormal investigations. Welcome to Creative Visions TV. I'm your host, Karen Dahlman, and today we're going to talk with a guy who is a seasoned paranormal investigator. He's been doing it for 25 years. And by the way, he's been doing it on both sides of the Atlantic, in England and the United States. So originally he's from Leicester, England, and he spent as a child spending the night at his grandparents' house that was haunted. And this really piqued his curiosity and interest into the paranormal phenomenon. He started reading everything he could on it and then began doing his own investigations. Fast forward to 1999, and he relocated to the United States. And with him, he brought his love of ghost, paranormal investigations, and exploring all these things that go bump in the night. So our guest today here is an author. He's an author, actually, he's an incredible author of many, many books on paranormal subjects. And a lot that he deals with is the ghost, of course. And he does his investigations where he spends the night in a lot of some of the most extremely haunted places in the United States as well as in the UK, and writes about them. Two of his latest books is The Devil's Coming to Get Me, The Haunting at Malvern Manor, and the other one that just came out in December of 2018 is Haunted Healthcare. Now, you can get all of his books. We'll talk about that later where, but I know they're available on Amazon.com and some other places as well. Now, as I mentioned, he's been doing this work for 25 years. And along with his writing and investigations, he also is a regular columnist for Haunted Magazine. Now, his work has been featured on some hot TV shows. For example, Haunted Case Files, which is currently airing in the USA and the Travel Channel, which is doing great. He has Haunted Hospitals, which is doing great in the UK. He also has a current shooting he's working on called Paranormal 911. Now, you're going to understand why he does all this work in the hospitals and the paranormal with the 911, because in his real day life, he is a paramedic, a chief paramedic, as a matter of fact. He is also the director of the Boulder County Paranormal Society, BCPRS. It's a mouthful to say. And he also lives in Colorado with his wife, a dog, and 3 huge black cats. And you guys know I love my black cats. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome our guest today, Richard Estep. Welcome, Richard. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Karen. How are you?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for inviting me onto the show.
Well, it's such a joy to have you. You guys, I got to tell you, Richard and I met last November at the Sage Paracon event. Now, I shared here on this channel about that event coming up, and I did a couple sessions on it, talked about it. And so Richard's one of the gentlemen I met there, and he had a booth right next to mine. In the UK, they call them stalls. And we sat there and sold our books together.
Now, here in the US, a stall is where you go to the restroom, right?
Well, we would call that a bathroom or a stall or a toilet, yes. Stall would be where we go to the bathroom. So I don't know why they call them stalls there, but they do. So I call them booths. But anyway, we had a great time. What were your thoughts about Sage Paracon?
That was a blast. It was such a fun time from beginning to end. Historic location, Coombe Abbey, you know. So you have this ancient abbey. You have a whole bunch of places to investigate and some terrific paranormal investigators on site and a whole bunch of attendees that are every bit as knowledgeable as we were. So it was I would say it's one of my favorite conventions I've ever attended, and I've been doing it for 25 years.
That's a lot to say.
It is.
Know what? I feel hands down the same way myself. I've been to a lot of different kinds of conventions or events, and this has been my favorite by far. And I think it's because MJ, the director, really takes the time to make it intimate, so you can get to know everybody, and puts a lot of energy and effort into to like mixers and events and the dancing and she does karaoke. And then we had this incredible paranormal investigation. The first was that Thursday night, right? It was Thursday night, yeah.
It's one big blur, isn't it? But I think it was Thursday night.
We had a lot of fun, guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, I also wanted to talk with Richard a little bit about Ouija boards, because Richard supported this Talking Boards Historical Society, which you guys know I'm a director of, and he purchased, what board did you purchase from us?
Oh, this is an absolute beauty. Look at that.
Yes. Yes.
And I believe, isn't this the board that you have behind you right now also?
I do. So you guys know I love this board too. So I got this for myself. But yeah, I brought a bunch of boards with me there, and they went within an hour. They were sold like that, and Richard immediately snatched one up. This is a great 1940s board. It's and what's cool about it on the backside? Checkers, ghost, checkers, ghost.
But what's cool
checkers.
about mine, and I've kind of defaced it, is that all of the guests signed it. So Karen, you signed this. Katrina Weidman from Paranormal Lockdown. MJ, Barry Guy, Barry John, the medium. Chris Fleming, the medium, of course. All of the guests signed this. So
I think Aaron Sagers, too, signed
Aaron
it.
Sagers, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It hangs in my office usually, so it's a reminder of that great weekend and good comradeship.
And you guys, it's common when you do go to these events for people to sign Ouija boards. When I was first approached with this a few years back, it kind of freaked me out because I'm like, oh, don't deface a Ouija board. But I realized that, you know what, you could still use it. So, yeah, to sign the boards is really kind of a cool thing. So, anyway.
Well, I think it imbues it with a lot of positive energy because I've such strong, happy memories of that weekend and those people. And a little tiny piece of them is with that board forever. So I'd argue it probably is going to have a benefit.
I would agree with that, too.
Yet, but I'm gonna.
Yeah, you're bringing all that good energy with you. So tell the audience here, what's your take on the Ouija board? What do you think about it? Spooky, scary, cheer, fear, or jeer?
Well, living here in the US, I know that a lot of folks are very anti-Ouija board, and I guess also in the UK somewhat, but more so in the States, a lot of people are actively scared of using the board. And I've never understood why this particular method of communication is any different than using a digital device. I mean, the process is the same, right? But you're essentially using it as an avenue to communicate with spirit entities. I don't think it's any more dangerous or concerning than any of the gadgets that we see used on our investigations. Just doesn't have an on-off switch. And I think a lot of it comes down to intent. A lot of it comes down to your willingness to only work with positive energies and the boundaries that you set prior to the session. But what do you think? You're the expert.
Well, you know what? I concur with what you're saying. The on and off switch to me has always been ourselves. And so we need to decide ourselves we're done using it. And you know, you can say goodbye however you want to close the session and how you want to open it. But yeah, Richard's right. And you guys know we talk about this on this channel all the time. I think it's a fantastic tool to use to explore the other realms. And I do see it as no different than a K2 meter or a Frank's box or obelisk. I mean, what other tools do you use in your investigations?
So I'm a big fan of using the whole spectrum. So, of course, there's all the flashy stuff you see that you can spend like a mortgage payment on getting a Frank's box. You know, you can get a portal, you can get an obelisk. I use those kind of things, absolutely. But I think as a profession, we've become very tech reliant.
Yeah.
And it might be a controversial thing to say, and I mean no disrespect, but it's kind of lazy in some ways. I'm a big believer that the more traditional methods as well, like scrying, like spirit boards, and stuff like the human pendulum, also have their place. And I don't think you need to choose either or. I think that you can integrate all of this stuff into a comprehensive investigation if you have the time and the will to do so.
That's a great way of looking at it, I think, too. When I do paranormal investigations, of course, I enjoy the board because that's what I do. But I also like EVPs. I've kind of gotten hooked on that, too. And I have my digital recorder all the time. And I also enjoy doing the Frank's box or the K2 meter. And I don't have all those things because I'm so good at using the Ouija board. But I agree with what you said, too, about you use your human self as also a tool, if you will, to read the energies. And I think we all have that ability. And by the way, this channel, Richard, is about how we can develop those abilities within ourselves even more so we can, you know, begin to explore and understand the world around us more. And this includes all this paranormal stuff that, you know, is unseen.
Yeah, I think that when paranormal investigators do what we do, it's nice to get corroborative evidence. So if you're in a room and somebody feels cold, if you measure a temperature drop, if you're also then able to get an EVP, you're starting to look at technical and more kind of subjective human occurrences happening at the same time. I think that's validation, using multiple different methods. So when you use tech, when you use more traditional methods and they kind of jive together, I think that makes for more compelling supportive evidence than just one piece alone.
Yeah, I think we do need to look at it more holistically, and that's a nice way of looking at it. You know, it's like I call it old school meets new school. You know, old school is more the medium and it's the body sensing, the scrying, the Ouija board, the pendulum, things of that nature. Then it meets the high tech, and I think there's a place for all. Now, you and I were talking a little earlier before you came on, and you'd mentioned a couple examples where you and some of your paranormal investigations had used the board. Do you want to share one of those or two of those?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite examples is the board behind me. And And I asked you about this one. I guess this is a 1970s era board. That's about right, Karen?
Yeah, the earliest it would be in 1966 or 1960. That's when Parker Brothers bought it. It's a Parker Brothers board, you guys, but it's one of the bigger ones, and it's one of the earlier ones.
And this was my wife's grandmother's board. So we live here in the States outside Denver, and I was traveling to the UK to investigate a place called 39 de Grey Street, or the Hostel, which I don't think many of your American audiences will have heard of. But in the UK, it's quite well known, especially if you watched Chris Fleming and Barry Guy's TV show Help My House is Haunted, where this case was featured. And it had a reputation for being quite a dark, haunted location. So I wanted to take a board with me to see what I could communicate with. And my wife, being a little bit wary ever since we brought a negative attachment home, well, I brought a negative attachment home once and had to have my house cleansed. She took the board and said, listen, you can borrow this, but I'm going to talk to Grandma. Of course, Grandma is long dead. And I'm going to have a word, and I'm going to tell her that she's to watch over you and the board and that nothing negative is going to be able to come through and bother you, okay? So I said, sure, absolutely. So I took this board to the hostel, and we could not get it to work, try as we might, no matter how many sitters we have, combinations of people, which rooms we tried it in, day or night, didn't work at all. This thing would not move. So I put it aside, and somebody had left a Ouija board there. And we used that board instead. And this was one of your brand new, you could get this for $20 on Amazon kind of boards. And that worked like a charm right out of the gate. All of the information that came through that we proved was pretty much gibberish, was a big waste of time. I think we were communicating with something mischievous, certainly something untruthful. And it leads me to suspect that when my wife entreated her grandmother to watch over the board and not let anything negative come through, I think that happened. I think the board took her at her word. And I lugged this thing on a 10,000-mile round trip for nothing.
Well, I think it kind of gave you the solace or comfort that maybe grandmother was there watching over you. So it was for something.
Yeah, it made her feel a whole lot better. It made me feel frustrated I couldn't get it to work. But it also was very illustrative that another board, a board with absolutely an unknown history to me, worked fine. And this one, which has been now in the family for 3 generations, was not going to work at all. And I've used this at other locations with no issue at all. And
you've used it since then as well, right? And it still works?
Yeah, although I did get into a bit of trouble because the TSA broke the planchette coming back from the UK. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. So the original planchette that came with that? I'm so sorry to hear that. Yeah, you know what? When I went to the UK, I didn't travel with my planchettes for that reason. And I'll tell you I'll tell you what I did instead, Richard. If you saw what I was doing when I was teaching my paranormal class at the UK at the Sage Paracon, I used CDs. And I didn't care if the CDs broke, and they slide so nicely. So I brought a bunch of those, like 6 of them with me, and I let people use those too. And I was just afraid to lose a planchette or, have one broken. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Now, there was another experience you were telling me about, and this one's really cool, where you also used a board and got some really interesting information.
Oh, that's right. So I used a board, and for your watchers, your viewers, guys, if you want to read the full story on this, you can read about it in Spirits of the Cage, a book I wrote about my time investigating England's notorious haunted witches' prison. And this is a building that is hundreds of years old. It goes back to the English equivalent of Salem, the Salem witch trials, except it took place 100 years prior to that. And so the Cage is a prison where those accused of witchcraft were kept incarcerated while they awaited sentence and, in some cases, execution. And I was fortunate enough that the owner, Vanessa Mitchell, allowed me to move in for a week and do research. So
did you guys hear that? He moved in. He moved into this place for a week.
Well, it's like a prison sentence, but you can leave if you want to, which is kind of cool. So we move in and we get some interesting activity, and we decide to do a Ouija board session. And this is a very old coastal area. Viking raids, for example, were well known in this area. So it's got a bloody and long history. And, of course, the English witch trials kind of centered around the region of Essex. So I knew that just the area itself should be fertile ground for communicating with something. And so we sat in the cage itself, myself and a couple of other sitters. We put out a Ouija board, and we began to use it. And we communicated with a spirit that said its name was Redfast. That's Redfast, which is a meaningless term, or so I thought. I thought it was gibberish. And this spirit claimed to be the spirit of a shepherd that had worked the land 1,000 years before.
Wow.
and just happened to be not connected to the prison at all, but happened to be in the area and would return on occasion, just because he found it pleasant, had happy memories, would drop by in visitation. So I said, that's a weird name, Redfast. Afterwards, I did some research and found out that the term Redfast was a nickname you would have during that period of history if you were red-faced. So if you were one of these jolly red-faced men that either was outdoor all the time in the wind, and therefore you had a lot of wind there and you had those ruddy red cheeks and nose, or perhaps you liked to drink or two, or maybe both, they would nickname you sometimes Redfast or red-faced, as we would call it now. And that's not something I or any of the other sitters knew prior to sitting down for that board session. I found that very compelling.
When you get something like that, a nugget like that, and you can get, you can back it up, that's when you go, wow, I'm on something here. And that's when you've got something that you could probably communicate with more and maybe even get more information that's more reliable. So I always tell everybody that starts out using this tool, is that you can't trust everything that comes through. It's going to be a lot of times gibberish until you really make that connection and really connect well with the person you're working with, or connect like this red fast guy, and he might be somebody they could work with more and more because he's bringing forth stuff that could be validated. So it just takes time. But anyway, those are true great examples. I love that. Now, I've got to ask you, with your background and your work as a paramedic, you're working with life and death all the time, right on the edge of it. How does that play into, the paranormal phenomenon or the ghost phenomenon for you? Do you have those kinds of experiences during your work?
I'd love to tell you I did, but I don't. And generally the reason for that is, I think, pretty simple. I'm focusing on my patient. And if I'm not focusing 100% on my patient, I'm doing them a disservice. So there could be a parade of headless horsemen marching by me in the background and I wouldn't notice because I'm too fixated on what my patient needs next, what their needs are. But as I've written books such as World's Most Haunted Hospitals and Haunted Healthcare, a lot of medical professionals do have paranormal experiences. And the majority that I talk to have been nurses, especially end-of-life care nurses, and physicians and those that work more long-term with patients. My patient should never be with me for more than 30 minutes to 45 minutes or something is really, really wrong. But for providers that have a little bit longer around their patients, they've got some incredible stories and experiences. And because it's become fairly well known what I do, a lot of them share them with me. And I love nothing better than hearing stories from those kind of people because they're scientifically trained. They come from the medical profession, These generally aren't fanciful people. They aren't people that tend to let their imaginations run away with them. So I love hearing from medical professionals that have had experiences like that.
Well, we'd love to hear maybe what's your top 3 favorite haunted places and some of the stories that you have heard from these kind of people.
My top 3 haunted places, like just medical or generally overall?
We'll say overall because I know he writes a lot about the medical stuff, the healthcare and the hospitals. We also write about asylums, this other place in Essex we just talked about. So yeah, tell us the top 3. It could be any of the above.
Oh, so many. I love, in the UK, one of my favorite haunts is the Black Monk House, which is in Pontefract. American viewers will know it as the Black Monk House. British viewers will know it as 30 East Drive. It is a book that was first brought to popularity by a gentleman called Colin Wilson. I'm looking to see if I have his book within reach on my shelf. He wrote a study called Poltergeist about this outbreak in the 1960s and 70s in an ordinary residential neighborhood. The poltergeist in question was extremely well documented, extremely violent, attacked several members of the family. But poltergeist cases tend to, I think of them as the shooting stars of the paranormal world, Okay. They burn very brightly for a short period of time and then they're gone. So it's rare to find a poltergeist case on record that lasts more than 18 months tops, 2 years maybe. This house, though, is still active 60 years later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Paranormal Lockdown. Nick and Katrina did their Halloween lockdown at the beginning of season 2 in the Black Monk House and got the most incredible activity. There was a movie made about this place in 2011 called When the Lights Went Out. And the owner of that place allowed me and a team to move in for a week. And that's one of my favorite locations because that house is still active to this day. It's built on a former battlefield. And the entire neighborhood has some very, very odd stories. But what I love most about it is it's an ordinary house. It looks like yours or mine. This isn't some ancient crumbling old witch's prison like the Cage.
Okay.
This looks like actually, the reason that house creeped me out so much had nothing to do with ghosts. It looks exactly like my grandmother's house did when I was growing up as a young boy.
Ooh.
And you walk in the door, and it's the original like 70s decor. So I almost had deja vu or flashbacks of going back to the 1970s when I was a young kid, walking into this house and seeing old VHS and Betamax tapes and things like that are still in there.
Shag carpet, the orange and green.
Yeah, the fantastic wallpaper.
I remember that.
Yeah. So that's one of my favorites.
But tell us about some of the things that happen there that are so eerie.
Well, the first thing was that, and we traveled a long way to do this place. So I brought in a team from America, and a couple of my English friends came with me as well. So we go to the house, get a tour of the place, and it's a little bit creepy and unnerving. But it's the middle of the day, you know. So I meet the owner, and I want to interview him. I want to get his perspective and everything. So he said, let's go to the pub. I'm like, brilliant. Why not? Let's just, I'll stay off the alcohol because I have a no alcohol rule when it comes to investigations. But we can grab some lunch. Yeah, we can grab some lunch and then come back. So we decide we're going to go do that. I lock up the house tight. There's a drum. We leave our equipment there, and we'll go to the pub. But I'm very, very sneaky. And I thought, I've waited all my life to come to this location. I'd read about this when I was a boy, this case. So I don't want to miss a minute of it. And I left the voice recorder running, and I concealed it at the top of the stairs behind a grandmother clock. And even though the house was empty, because we'd searched it and we knew this, I was like, anything could be happening while I'm gone, and I'll be missing it, and I've got FOMO. I've got this fear of missing out. So I'll just leave a recorder running. We go to the pub. We're gone about an hour. We come back. I walk into the hallway at the bottom of the stairs, and this big mirror which hangs on the wall is smashed on the floor.
Really?
It's been pulled from the wall, smashed on the floor. And so we all stop, and Bill, the owner, said, that's kind of the poltergeist. Fred is the nickname that the family gave to the poltergeist. That's Fred's welcome to you. Wow. Now, I'm very suspicious, Karen, as a paranormal investigator, and I take the philosophy in life that if something looks too good to be true, it usually is.
Yeah, okay.
So even though I've got the keys to the house in my pocket, I think here's what probably happened. Somebody came in while we were gone. The owner probably set this up. And it turns out, by the way, he's as honest as the day is long, but you've always got to be suspicious. You still got
to look at it, right? You still got to ask those questions.
And I think he gave somebody a spare key. They came in, broke a mirror, and then I'm going to be super impressed, right? And I'm going to put this in my next book, and it's good publicity. There's always a motive, and when there's a motive, you have to consider fraud. But I'd left this recorder running. So I went upstairs, and I didn't tell anyone I'd left it running. And I pulled down my noise-canceling headphones, and I listened. And I listened to 25 minutes of silence, and then this colossal crash as the mirror breaks. There were no footsteps at all. Nobody walked into the house. Nobody opened a door. It's impossible to walk on those floorboards without making a noise. And here's how I know. I picked the lightest member of my team, Jason, who weighs about as much as my left leg. And I said, Jason, I'm going to start my recorder running again in the same spot. I want you to creep into this house from the outside. Open the door as quietly as you can. Slither on all fours if you have to, or on your belly, to not make any noise. Super slow to reach the point where that mirror broke. And then we'll see if we recorded anything. And there were enough creaks that as he shifted his weight, even very, very carefully, there's no way someone could have come in physically into the house completely silently and broke it. So that mirror breaking was kind of a welcome to the Black Monk house, and it's something I will never forget.
Did that make it into your book?
It did. I have the before and after photographs. I was very pleased that I had taken reference photographs first. And the other odd thing about the position of the mirror was rather than just, it was hung on a very thick piece of knotted string, like industrial grade from a nail. And rather than just the string breaking, this thing had been pulled off the wall and it had moved sideways 3 feet.
Oh, so I see what you're saying. Yeah, you would have thought if it broke, the string shattered, it would have just come down and the string would be broken, but it had to be lifted off is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Oh, very interesting.
And that thing had been on the wall for years.
Crazy.
And the minute I walked in to write about the place is when it decides to break. So I was very satisfied that we ruled out fraud. And I have no good explanation for it to this day. And that was just the beginning of our experiences at the Black Monk House.
Well, this is how I'll call it EVP, but your audio recorder really helped you out to kind of Because if not, you would just gone, oh, I don't know what this is. You could never say one thing one way or the other. At least now you could prove that somebody couldn't have walked in and you would have heard the sounds. So, okay, so that's one of the top three. What about the other top two?
Well, here in the States, I think my favorite location of them all is Asylum 49.
I knew you were going to say that.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
I think it's because, well, for various reasons. For those that don't know it, it's in Utah. It's in a small town called Tooele, which is about 30 minutes drive from Salt Lake. Beautiful area, out past the mountains on the flats, the Salt Flats. And Tooele's small town, USA, a very nice little friendly place. But this old hospital closed down, I want to say about 15 years ago, and then was purchased, and now it's a full contact Halloween haunted house attraction.
You're right.
So it's so you investigate this place at night, and you need nerves of steel, not just because of the ghosts, but because around every corner is a zombie, and some kind of terrifying creature of the night, and they're animatronic, and there are werewolves that'll jump out at you and those kind of things. But what's fascinating about this location is that it was part hospital, and then the back part of it was a skilled nursing facility. So until just 2 years ago, this was a nursing facility that housed retirees and senior citizens. And your viewers might have seen this featured twice on the show Ghost Adventures.
Oh, okay.
They filmed twice at Asylum 49. One was the haunted house attraction itself, and then the second part was when they moved the senior citizens out and the nursing home was abandoned. And my team and I were given the gift of being allowed to be the first paranormal investigators to investigate on the nursing home side. And it's the most active location I think I've ever investigated.
Really? Is it right next door to a graveyard too?
It is. So there's a graveyard directly next door as well.
How perfect is this, you guys?
Zach Bagans used the term ghost factory, which in this case may not be much of an exaggeration. But I'm a big fan of that location in general, because also, ghosts aside for just a moment, there's not a lot to do in small town Tooele on an evening. And the kids, and most of them are children that are involved with this place, it's a big creative outlet for them. They create characters in the haunt, they audition, and then they perform. And so it's all volunteer run. It gives the kids something positive to do weekends. And I shudder to think what a lot of them would be doing and being involved in if they didn't have this creative outlet. And this is the only place where we know there's a lot of money in, paranormal tourism. People rent out locations for thousands of dollars. When I was last there a few months ago, the owner said, we're not doing any ticket sales today. We're going to accept donations for the community food bank. So if you want to, and they raised hundreds of pounds of food for the needy of the community. So it's a family, and I've watched just the most incredible things happen there. And then the paranormal stuff on top of it. The kids are very down with the place being haunted. They think it's cool. They've all got ghost stories. And what fascinates me is the spirits seem to actually really be on board with what's happening. They seem to become most active around the Halloween season. I heard about this place, and I wrote about it for World's Most Haunted Hospitals. I went out there for one night originally, and it was quiet. Nothing happened. But I went out there in the spring. This was about April. And the owner said, well, for 9 months of the year, we're pretty much dormant here at Asylum 49. The building's empty for the most part. There's nothing going on. There's no energy going on here. But when we start to hit September, we ramp up for Halloween. That's when all of the people come in. And you have tens of thousands of people coming through this building with one intent, to be scared.
Oh, wow. I love it.
And it provides this energy. So my team and I now will go out at Halloween. We'll move in for a week, and we'll work in the haunt. So we'll actually be zombie doctors and all those kind of things. It's great fun. And when the last person leaves at midnight and the energy's at a peak, we'll break out our paranormal investigation gear and we'll investigate until dawn. Nice. So we spend the first part of the night charging things up, and then the rest of it dealing with the consequences. And it's fantastic.
That's interesting. So, okay, so let's be clear. So the kids can use it as a place to be creative, build stuff, and so it's like a community resource place. And Absolutely. Then also it's haunted attractions, and you guys actually play the parts in there. And then all this energy, which is really positive energy in a way, because people, people enjoy getting scared on Halloween, and the kids enjoy being there creating things, and you guys enjoy giving back, and then you spend the night in haunt. So you've got this buildup of energy. And so give us some examples of what kinds of really cool things you've experienced.
Well, the only time in my career, and as you said earlier, I've done this for 25 years.
Yeah.
The only time in my career I've seen an apparition was at Asylum 49. How perfect was this on Halloween night?
Whoa, that's it.
And I kick myself to this day because of it. As an investigator, I hear a lot of people tell me, I saw an apparition and this and that. And I always am thinking, would it really have killed you to reach into your pocket and pull out your cell phone and take a picture? Why don't we have all these
in this day and age? And I got to tell you, I saw my apparition, and I saw a half-body apparition. Last one I saw was about 8 years ago, and I was on a trip to Mexico. I didn't bring my phone with me, and so when I saw it, I couldn't go, oh, camera. There was nothing there, and it was like real quick. So I could see where people can't. But in day and age now, when we have our cell phones, glued to our pockets, I'm with you. So did you have your cell phone?
Well, I had to eat my own words, and here's why.
Oh, no.
So I decided that before, this was the first year I'd ever been there, so I said, before I start working this, I'd like to go through as the customers did. So I'm just going to be me. I'm just going to go on through and go through the haunt and get scared. And because there are multiple switchbacks, it can take 2 hours to get through this haunt. You have to sign a waiver because they'll physically manhandle you. They'll put you in a coffin and do all kinds of stuff.
Oh, wow.
So, it's an intense experience. It gets your heart rate up. And all the time you're being watched on infrared cameras from the control room for safety reasons. So I go through, and I'm having a great time. And I've been around in the daylight. I know where all the jump scares are, and I'm still jumping. It's that good.
Yeah, good.
And then as I walk through, I come out of this area, and I see a little girl. She's maybe 7 years old, 6 or 7. She's dressed in this, she looks kind of like Snow White dress, or that kind of thing, I'm sorry, not Snow White, Goldilocks.
Goldilocks. Okay, difference. All right.
Yeah, Goldilocks. And she's pulling this lady into like one of the side rooms, which happens quite often, And the lady that's being pulled in is kind of like, oh, you're creepy. And I go, wow, the girl looks like she's having a great time. She's got this, smirk on her face. Like, come on, lady, come on, you're coming whether you want to or not. And this lady's like, doesn't seem to be cool with it. So I laughed and I walked on by. But I thought, she's awful young to be working in a full contact haunted house. I think nothing of it. She looks as real as you are right now to me. And I get through at the end and I mention it to the owners and I say, guys, that was a great experience, but I am so surprised. The liability of having like a 6 or a 7-year-old kid in there, doesn't that scare you? And they look at one another and say, what do you mean?
Oh, no.
And I say, well, the girl, the girl in the dress. The blonde girl. And they look at each other again. They look at me and said, describe her. So I did. And they said, yeah, I hate to tell you, we don't have anyone like that working here. Nobody that age. I'm like, I saw her. Oh. So I start thinking rationally and I think, oh, somebody must have brought this child in with them. That must have been her mom. And they said, no, because we're very specific about not allowing children that young into a place with all this blood and gore and those kind of things. But just to make sure, I went to check with the people that were selling tickets, and they'd had no child younger than 14 or 15 come in that night. So I went to the cast room where all of the kids that act in there are taking off their makeup. And the owner said, here's everybody that worked here tonight. Tell me if you see your girl. And I walk up and down the line. She's not there. So I can only conclude that this was an apparition because it fits the description of a young girl that died in the hospital and has been seen several times by the cast, by the staff, and by visitors alike.
Oh, so I just got chills through my whole body when you said that. So who was this older lady that the little girl was pulling along?
Well, the older lady was dressed very conventionally in blue jeans and stuff. So I think this was a customer. The lady was a customer. Little girl wasn't. And
so there's a ghost pulling a customer into another room.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you see that? Did you find that customer to ask her?
I couldn't because they'd gone for the night.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And I wrote about this in my book, The Haunting of Asylum 49. I talked about it on shows. If she ever hears me on an interview, I would love for her to contact me and tell me her side of the story. But I went, you were looking at an apparition. You had a cell phone right there in your hip pocket.
But you didn't know it was an apparition.
I know, but it never occurred to me to take a picture. And so now I have so much sympathy for all those people who said, I didn't think to take a photograph because she looked solid. She looked real. So,
and I will say this too. When you have any, because I see visitations and apparitions every now and then, and even when I was a child, I'd see them. And then when I'd planned to have a camera, back then we had the regular, film cameras, I'd have them laying by my bedside and waiting for the next apparition that would come. I had a lot of visitors when I was a child, and they would never come. And of course, then when I didn't have the camera out or was out of film or something, then they would come. It was that kind of thing. So that happens too. But that is an incredible story.
It was an amazing experience. And one of the things that fascinates me, we talk about seeing ghosts. Yeah. And I'm not convinced that we do, ever.
I'm not either. Okay, let's talk about this. I think
seeing is the wrong word. I think there are enough stories of, for example, I do ghost tours at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, inspiration for The Shining. So we take tours of 20 people around there. And there are enough instances of 3 or 4 people on a tour will see something odd, and yet the rest of the tour won't. It might be a mysterious figure or whatever. Why would some people see and other people not see? I mean, ignoring those who aren't paying attention, or men, as I like to call them, for the most part, here's what I suspect. I think when somebody sees an apparition, we perceive it in some way other than the eyes.
Yeah.
And what I encourage people to do when I work help cases, I always say this: if you're looking at a shadow figure or an apparition or what you think is, take a finger and just push on your eyeball like that, okay? When you do that, you're doing the same thing. So your eye needs to stay open, but I just want you to push on the eyeball like that. And what it does is it blurs whatever you're looking at.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Now,
okay.
That's exactly what you do when you squint. You're changing the shape of the eye anatomically in order to bring something into clearer or less clear focus. If what you're looking at blurs, it has objective reality. Light is reflecting from that thing and it's going into your eye. But if what you're looking at doesn't blur, you're not actually seeing it at all. You're perceiving it some other way, whether that's psychically or whether it's a hallucination. But you know that you're perceiving it through different means. And I suspect that most ghost sightings, we term it the wrong way. I don't think we're seeing them at all. I think they're being perceived in another way.
I have to concur with you. I agree with you on that 100%. I find that when we do this work and we start developing our own sensitivities within, we see, as my guides like to call it, we see with the eyes, or we hear with the ears of our heart, the eyes and ears of our heart. So it's a whole different way. You could call it your pineal gland, your third eye. You're seeing it differently, because I would see things all the time and people be around me and not see them either. So I agree. I've had that experience, and it's frustrating for the people who see it when somebody you're with doesn't see it too. But then again, we're all kind of have our own abilities or ways of working these kind of internal apparatus that's not so physical. So I'm glad you touched upon that. I also wanted to ask you about this topic, this thought, because it goes along with the thought you just brought up. Before we go into your third favorite place, what do you think about this? So we all think that what we see, or these poltergeists, or even the apparitions, we all think they're dead people. Is it possible it could be a bleed through from another parallel reality of other humans existing, but just changed off a little bit, like tuning into the dial, they're phased in and phased out, kind of like that movie The Others by Nicole Kidman, and maybe they're not really dead people. What's your thoughts on that?
So it reminds me of an incident that happened in the Cripple Creek jail.
I love that place. Oh my gosh, yes. Okay.
Oh, you know it?
Yes, I do.
My book on that is due out later this year. But we filmed that for Haunted Case Files, and I wrote about it in my book, Trail of Terror. And the experience I had there was interesting. I was invited to do a charity investigation for law enforcement charity, and those kind of things. And I was like, I'm all over it. This is very, very cool. Let's go help some good people and investigate a haunted place. So we're investigating the cell block, and I'm locked in one of the cells, and I have one of my other investigators that's standing in the doorway. And a third investigator, a friend of mine called Sean Crusher, comes walking into the cell, and he stops dead in his tracks when he sees me. And he said, "How did you get in here so fast?" I said, "What do you mean, Sean?" He said, "I just saw you standing out there on the cell block."
Interesting.
I said, "Mate, you didn't, because I've been in here for 20 minutes. And he said, "No, I did. I know you. You were taking photographs on the cell block. But hang on a minute, your shirt's different. You were wearing a different colored shirt. But I know you. I'd know you in, any circumstances. This was you." And so the investigator that had been standing on the door said, no, Richard's been here for 20 minutes. I've been on this door. He has not left my side. You cannot have seen him. And the old saying, you look like you saw a ghost.
Yeah.
He's like a 20-year paranormal investigator who finally got that experience. He went ashen and was like, I don't know what I saw, but it was you. That was your face. That was your body. That was your posture. Just the shirt was different. The pants were the same. The shorts were the shoes were the same. So anyway, I thought it was kind of cool because I thought that sounds like a doppelganger. And then
does, or by location, maybe?
Well, his thing, Dave Schrader, I was talking to him about this story, and he said, have you considered the possibility that this was a time slip?
Yeah.
That in the future, you will go to that jail, and you'll be wearing a different shirt, and you then in the past will see you in the future, and that's what, or more accurately, Sean saw a future you. He said, do you have any plans to go back? And I said, yeah, I'm moving in for a week, which I just did with a team of Canadian correctional officers, prison officers, who are also paranormal investigators. Big shout out to those guys. And we just did an investigation there.
Oh,
and
I read your blog
really
about that, by the way. He has a blog on this, Cripple Creek, and with those guys, right, on your website?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I made sure to wear a shirt the same color that Sean had seen me in. So it may be that Sean saw a time slip, but it could easily have been a different me, as you said, kind of bleeding over from some other plane or dimension or reality.
Well, I mean, we're multidimensional beings. I know it's hard for us to grasp that idea. I've come to the conclusion that's what we are, and we exist in these different timelines at the same time. And so maybe that was another aspect of you. We'll call them doppelganger. We'll call it bilocation. We'll call it the time slip or cracking the code of the time-space continuum. But wow, that's interesting. So are you going to write about that in your upcoming book on this topic?
I did that. I wrote about that in my book Trail of Terror, which contains my first experiences at Cripple Creek. But Cripple Creek is such a rich case that we got a whole new level of activity when I brought real prison guards in for a week. Oh. I mean, these guys locked down the cell block at night with us in the cells. So they're walking around slamming the cell doors and yelling at people to get to sleep, put the lights out. It stirred up some incredible energies. So that's going to be getting its own book, which will be finished later this year.
Oh, congratulations on that. Okay, so now tell us about the number 3 place that was one of your top places to investigate.
I'm going to have to go with the Stanley.
You guys know, now I got to say this. I went to the Stanley just recently last year. It was I've been there before driving through, but never stayed at. I spent the night and I shared a video here on my own little investigation, and nothing exciting happened for me. But you tell us your experiences. You've had a lot more experience there than I have.
Well, the main reason I went there, I heard they were doing ghost tours, and I was like, I think I would love to do that. They stopped running paranormal investigations for the public there a few years ago, for reasons the owner chooses not to do so. And so the only way to really do any paranormal investigation there is to work there.
Yeah.
And it's not as if I do anything formal, but you do immerse yourself in those haunted locations. It's good to run EVP sessions and so forth. So I took a job there, and my wife Laura said, you do realize that if anyone has a vested interest in faking this stuff, it's a hotel that makes millions of dollars a year on its haunted reputation, right? You're going to get up there and you're going to find it's all overblown, it's exaggerated, probably they're faking the stuff. And I said, if that happens, I'll quit, because I won't be a part of that. And 3 years later, I'm still there. It's very genuinely a haunted location. All of the tour guides have multiple experiences to share, and some of the things that we see are just incredible. Some of the things we experience are incredible. And I'll give you an example. On one of my tours, it's a summer night. It's about 6 o'clock in the evening. We're in the concert hall, upstairs on the balcony in the concert hall. And I'm talking about one of the ghosts that's supposed to be active in that part of the concert hall, when all of a sudden we hear heavy footsteps downstairs on the main floor. Now, I have 20 people on my tour. We can all see the main floor, broad daylight. There is not a living person anywhere on that main floor at all. So I thought very quickly, and the only way this could be explained would be if somebody was in the basement with, say, a broom handle, smacking it on the ceiling.
Right.
To sound like footsteps. So I grab a couple of people from my tour, and I say, we're going downstairs. We're going to search it top to bottom. We go down. We look in every nook and cranny. The doors are locked. There was not a person down there at all. So we had 20 witnesses plus me all experience these phantom footsteps.
I know that area of the hotel too, and this is just a rich, magnificent place, and the history there is pretty cool. I also understand that the owner is not really, it doesn't really want that paranormal attraction to the hotel anymore. Is what I understand. It's not like he doesn't.
Well,
Really...
I can't speak for him, but
Right.
I can say that I believe he prefers the hotel to be known for its historic reputation.
Yes.
Which is certainly his prerogative.
Absolutely. And this place is just going there and just learning the history of the place is incredible and walking around the grounds. But that's wonderful that you had those experiences. I wasn't so fortunate, but did spend the night there. And I had a little bit of a tour, we'll call it that, and we had a chance to kind of walk around and see things. But one of the cool things we saw was that room, that famous room where The Shining was written, well, The Shining was inspired from, I should say, and also the hallway that inspired that with the girls bouncing the ball in the hallway. So I got all that, filmed it all, tried to do EVPs and did some videos, and it was just, and I did the Ouija board there too, and the Ouija board worked fine, but I got nothing of anything to really call home about, if you will. But it's a neat place. I do like that. And you're so close to it where you live. You're really close to it.
Yeah, relatively speaking, it's about 25 miles. It's been my experience over the years, and I can't speak for you, Karen, but probably the worst way to have a paranormal experience is to try.
I agree. It's so for me, when I go to these places and I want to, like, I go to Queen Mary and I'll stay there, and there I am again trying, it doesn't happen. And like the time in Mexico when I had the apparition of appear in front of me, I wasn't trying. I was getting ready to get up early in the morning and go golfing. I wanted to go hit the links and not be talking to ghost. So that's when it happens, you guys. It's so true. It's like when I was a kid waiting for that ghost to come back or whatever it was, the visitor, it wouldn't come when I had the camera out. But since I don't have the camera, then there's the appearance of something, strange. So you're so right about that. But if you ever get a chance to go to these places, and a lot of people that do watch the show also like to do their own investigation. So I got an idea. Why don't you, because you have such great experience, you've been to a lot of places, you write about these, you go in with a team yourself. What are some of the items you would share with somebody that wants to get into this more, or they do it and they just want to take it up the next step? What kind of words of advice would you recommend for them if they want to do more investigations of this level, this level of types?
Well, probably the most important thing I would say is there's a misconception, and I blame TV. There's a misconception that you must spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on equipment in order to be an effective investigator. But if you look at the dawn of the first psychical researchers, guys like Sir Oliver Lodge, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Sir William Crookes, people like that, they didn't have this array of equipment we do today. They had basic things like a thermometer, they had a pencil, a notepad, but most important of all, they had an inquiring mind and a willingness to experiment. So you can be an effective paranormal investigator on less than $100. I think as long as you have a digital voice recorder, which is I think essential for EVPs, a way of recording your observations, you are good to go. So do not buy into the concept that you need to bankrupt yourself to go do this. If you're into the gadgets and those kind of things, that's fine. But I think as a society in general, we spend so much time looking down at screens and less time experiencing. You ever go to a concert or an event and everybody has their camera out and they're not experiencing it. They're not right. So I strongly encourage people to start out basic. And I used to be the guy. Waverly Hills Sanatorium taught me this. I'm sure you're familiar with that location, and your viewers are. It's huge, and we rented Waverly Hills for a night 3 or 4 years ago, and you get it for 8 hours for $1,000, and that's it's a lot of money, but it was on my bucket list. So my friends and I, we investigated it, and we ran 12 cameras, a whole bunch of audio mics, and by the time it was set up, we had 6 hours left.
Oh yeah.
We spent a quarter of our time, and then I thought we have to watch 12 cameras worth of empty corridor video footage when we get back for the possibility that we might have caught something. That's not what I want to do here. That's not the best way to do this. I think the best way to do it is to experience. And so what I ended up doing was I would wander those darkened hallways. I would go into patient rooms, just leaving a voice recorder in my hand running, and I would just see what it felt like. I would sit quietly and observe. I would conduct EVP sessions, and that was far more productive than the hours of video footage that I'd recorded. And I'd spent so much time with my colleagues and friends running cables, setting up recorders, getting angles just right. I think it's not the right approach for me. And I encourage your guys, get involved, get immersed, experience rather than record to begin with.
That's really good advice. Now, do you recommend people join a local chapter or a group that does paranormal investigations?
I recommend that first of all you look at the organizations in your area and find one that's a good fit. There are some that are 100% tech, that they are equipment-based teams, and they won't work with anybody who has psychic sensitivities or anything of that nature. And then there are teams that are completely the opposite, that they will only do that. And so I encourage you that if you can't find a team that's a good fit for you, start your own. Right? Start your own. Become an independent investigator. There's a lot to be said, though, for finding one that you trust and apprenticing with them. I learned from a gentleman called Andrew Wright 25 years ago, who taught me a lot of what I know about paranormal investigation. He was very old school. If you picture Keith Richards, you're pretty much picturing Andrew, you know?
Okay.
Yeah. Andrew's kit bag involved a flashlight, a tape recorder, and 3 cans of lager. He was that guy, but he was a brilliant investigator and also a very good writer. Find someone that will show you the ropes and learn from them, but then use that as a jumping off point and develop your own style, which is how we learn in medicine. It's how we teach. As a paramedic, my bedside manner is really a function of all the people that taught me. I stole, quite frankly, in the best sense of the term, things that I liked from other paramedics. So it was one person's way of questioning a patient, was another person's way of performing a procedure. You take it all together and it becomes your style when you put your own spin on it. And then you have the delight of teaching other people and passing it on as you pay it forward. So I encourage that you do that. Find someone that you trust, a good role model. They'll be your starting point, and then run with it and become your own style of researcher.
That's great. And there's always so many places, many places around the place you can go to. And as you said, some will cost money. Some you just may know a family who has a house that has some stuff going on it. That's kind of where I started. I started with like homes of people that I knew or friends and family who had activity, and I would take my board with me and do it that way as well. So there's a lot you can learn there. Now, we're almost finished with the show, but I have to ask you about this, Richard. Richard also has done some investigation on UFO sightings, and you guys know I love UFOs and aliens. So what can you tell us about maybe just a highlight of maybe one of the sightings you investigated in Colorado?
Well, when I wrote a book about Colorado UFOs, primarily it was because I didn't have a lot of experience with the subject. I'd read a great deal about it. My bookshelves are full of UFO books, but I never actually investigated, you know. I wasn't part of MUFON or any kind of organized group. And my publisher said, I'd like you to go talk to people and see what they're experiencing. So I spent 2 years meeting contactees, abductees, folks that were experiencing strange phenomena, sometimes repeatedly. And I wanted to bring their stories to light. And I wanted to see whether certain aspects of the phenomenon were still going on today. And of course they are. I talked to one gentleman who was in the medical field, remains anonymous because he's fairly high up in the medical field, and has spent the past 45 years being abducted and continues to do so. And he shared his story with me only on condition of anonymity, that I would change his name when I wrote about it. But what impressed me most about it, Karen, was we have a bad habit, I think, in the paranormal field that you have your so-called ghost people, you have your cryptozoology people, you know, Bigfoot guys and so on. You have your ufologists, and we kind of treat it as a separate phenomenon.
I know.
And I've mentioned this a lot, but there's an old tale about 3 blind men who are all touching an elephant. And they're all touching a different part of the elephant. So one is touching the trunk, one's touching the tail, one's touching a leg. They all think it's a different beast. But in reality, they've got 3 different facets of the same thing. And having done the 2 years of UFO research, I've become convinced that we're all looking at a big umbrella phenomenon, and we're looking at different aspects of it. So I think we should all compare notes more. I think there needs to be a big round table which all of us come to with an equal status at, and I think that we should be comparing notes with our brothers and sisters in those other fields.
Well said. I agree with that as well. There's so many aspects of crossover and relationships to all these three things. And the more I look at all these different areas, and including a few others, I find that it's very well connected. And in some of the like we were just talking about earlier, the multi-dimensional self or the bleed through or the time-space continuum, there's so many aspects of it that fall into each of these categories. I mean, to me, they're all kind of supernatural in their own way. But can you give us just one, like maybe it was an encounter or an abduction that blew you away?
Yeah, I think the one that impressed me most, and it wasn't a specific encounter so much as the credibility of the witness. This gentleman was an airline pilot for a major airline. So this is a man who, we know the standard excuses that are trotted out by some skeptics for aerial phenomena. Oh, you were looking at Venus. It was refracted sunlight. You know, it's become a joke, right? Thanks to the movie Men in Black.
Swamp gas.
Yeah, reflecting off Venus, all that kind of stuff. But this gentleman was a trained observer of aerial phenomena. He knows what he's looking at in the sky because that's his job, and it has been for 30-something years. So he experienced something odd in the sky and became a contactee voluntarily. He was able to interact with extraterrestrials by going to isolated places. And he said it all depends on one's level of spiritual development, who they choose to interact with. The more you develop yourself spiritually, the more open you are to contact, the more likely they are to reciprocate and be willing to communicate with you. So for him, it was a very pleasant experience and continues to be. But what stuck out about this was that once the airline heard about this,
oh no,
they made him go to the company psychiatrist who assessed him thoroughly. Because here's one of the things, right, Karen? Ghosts these days, if you see ghosts, if you tell people you see ghosts, you're interested in ghosts, it's become mainstream enough, I think mostly, again, due to the TV shows.
That's right.
It's a water cooler subject, as they say here in the States, you know? You can talk about ghost hunters or ghost adventures or whatever around the water cooler at the office, and people don't usually bat an eyelid. But if you say UFOs, little green men is what people think of, and they think of pro, that kind of stuff. So he was made to go to a psychiatrist. And he was declared, he still has the document, declared sane by an airline's in-house psychiatrist after submitting to this barrage of questioning and testing. So he says very proudly, I'm an extraterrestrial contactee, and I am perfectly sane, and I have the piece of paper to prove it. Which I think is great, because I sure don't have that qualification. I don't know about you, but...
No, I don't. Not that somebody vouched for me.
But he had a very
oh my God, that's funny.
contactee experience. Another gentleman, the medical professional I mentioned earlier, his was the opposite. His experiences were very negative.
Yeah. He
was abducted against his will and continues to be. So what struck me also was the contrast between their two experiences. One, they were both life-changing, but one for the positive and one very much not.
And what having make talked of to that? What could you make of that?
Well, you know, part of me wonders if it isn't about the way we approach it with our own perceptions. So the analogy I like to use, we are assuming that you believe extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings, whatever you want to call them, assuming that you believe they're real, they are by definition more advanced than we are. So if you were to take a person from an Amazonian rainforest tribe, put them in the middle of Denver, and they get hit by a car, right? Who turns up? It's this big metal object with flashing lights on it, making strange noises. Somebody like me gets out wearing this strange garb and carrying all this strange equipment, boxes that light up that do strange things to you, you know. Now, in that case, the paramedics I'm talking about, we're working for your good, even though you don't understand it or appreciate it. You don't have the frame of reference to understand that. It seems painful when we start putting in needles and tubes and those kind of things, okay? And it reminded me, I think there's a parallel with the abduction experience there. When we talk about what people are subjected to when they're abducted, I almost wonder, we tend to think, thanks to Hollywood again, that this is a big, dark, evil master plan or something of that nature.
Right.
It may be that there are just motives there that we cannot fathom at our level of development. Does that make sense?
It does, and also, you know, with people, with humans, I mean, we do such callous and heinous stuff to each other and we do such beautiful things for each other too. So you have this whole spectrum of behavior, and so maybe the extraterrestrials are dynamic, just like human beings are, and have the same kind of different behaviors, because you'll hear how it's negative, you hear it's positive. And, I can use the analogy of the Ouija board. You hear the stories too. Why is it so positive for some people and so negative for others? And I have my own views on that, which I talk a lot about on the show, but it's always interesting to hear somebody else's views on that with the abduction element. And then, even with ghosts too. Why do some people have a negative experience with the ghosts and some are more positive? So I think it goes to show that there's a gamut of experiences to be had. And I think what I really liked what you said earlier is how you ask people to go out there and use the element of the human consciousness, the element of the humanity of ourselves to explore this and begin developing those tools within ourselves too, which then brings in a whole other element beyond the gadgets. Fantastic. Well, we've come to the end of our show, and it's been just a pleasure talking to you today. And I could just go on for hours and talk to you like we talked a lot. We were at the Sage Paracon. And by the way, you guys, Richard and I will be together at another show. It's Haunted America Conference with Troy Taylor, and that is in June. And that's in Alton, Illinois. And I'm looking forward to that. I know Richard is too.
Yeah, hope to meet some of you guys there. Looking forward to hanging out with you, Karen. We missed our chance to do a board together at Sage because we were so busy. So
I know. We'll do a board there. That's right.
Yeah.
He and I did not get to sit down. I sat down with a couple of people, MJ and then Barry John, and we had great experiences. So I look forward to sitting down with you as well. So where can people find you? Okay, tell us again what's coming up for you. Links, you guys, will be below, but go ahead and take this time to do that.
Yeah, right now I'm busy. I'm shooting Paranormal 911 in Toronto. I go back to start shooting that next week. Thanks. Should be out later this year. My latest book project, I have a book about the Black Monk haunting coming out, and I'm just finishing a book about the haunting of the Denver Botanic Gardens, and also one about the Farrar School in Iowa. You can keep up with me online at my website, www.richardestep.net, and I love to talk to people. If you're watching the show, you're my tribe. You're my kind of people because you are open-minded and have an interesting take on this kind of phenomena. So drop by and see me online. All my books are there. And, of course, you can find them at Amazon and the usual retailers, too.
Yeah, and you're on Facebook, too. So
I'm on Facebook, Richard Estep Author.
Yep. So join them there as well. And all links, you guys, will be below. So I want to thank you again, Richard, for coming on. It's been an absolute delight. And thank you for being our first guest here on the show for 2019.
Real pleasure, Karen. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So there you have it, you guys. Here's a gentleman who's pushing the boundaries of consciousness in ways of exploring the paranormal, the supernatural. And it doesn't just stay with the ghosts. He's looking at what else could be causing these phenomena. We talked about a little of that today. And then he is also, like I said, he talked about exploring the UFO, that whole arena itself, and looking at what the connections might be. So if you do get out there and start exploring more of these uncharted dimensions, take his advice and learn to develop your own senses within. Find somebody you trust and work with them as a tutelage, work under them, and explore. Open the curiosity of your mind and explore, and know that what you're probably going to experience will be more than just what you see with your eyes. Until then, until next time, you guys, this was Creative Visions TV. I'm Karen Dahlman. I look forward to seeing you again real soon. Bye-bye.